Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so delighted to introduce you to my guest today, Michael Roderick. Mike is the CEO of Small Pond Enterprises. Small Pond Enterprises helps thoughtful givers become thought leaders by making their brands referable, their messaging memorable, and their ideas unforgettable. He is also the host of the podcast, Access to Anyone, which shows how you can get to know anyone you want in business and in life using time-tested relationship-building principles. Mike's unique methodology comes from his own experience of going from being a high school English teacher to a Broadway producer in under 2 years. Please join me in welcoming Mike Roderick. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Tammy. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's a delight to have you. So, Mike, as you know, this podcast is all about the kinds of transitions that people make in their lives to find their way from different things they've done in the past to find more meaningful work or more satisfying work. Sounds like your whole career has been filled with lots of satisfying and meaningful endeavors, but you have made a lot of interesting transitions. And so I'm very curious to hear about your trajectory and take us back to the early years and where you began, even if it starts with your childhood. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I've had a lot of these types of questions, and it's fascinating whether you decide to go all the way back or whether you decide to go to sort of partially back. So I will say that to sort of begin with, I've just always been one of these people who has been really interested in solving problems, right? Mm-hmm. And looking at things in kind of a different way from the point where when I was in elementary school, I always was the kid who sort of had the, as many of the teachers would refer to it, overactive imagination, creating entire worlds out of a box of crayons and things like that. And once I got to high school, it took more of I guess you could say an entrepreneurial bent, because I started basically starting things, right? like actually getting stuff together. So while I was in high school, I noticed that our English department didn't have nearly the level of funding that our sports department had. I came up with the idea to have a battle of the bands as a fundraiser for our school's English department, and filled our entire auditorium. I make a joke that it's the night I beat George Lucas, because we had set up the time for the Battle of the Bands. The actual date for the Battle of the Bands was set up for when Empire Strikes Back. No, Return of the Jedi was being re-released in theaters. Yeah, and so we were like, oh no, we have to change the date, and we changed the date, and then the movie theaters changed the date again. So we went ahead with it, and we still sold out the entire auditorium, raised a good amount of money for the school's English department, and all had a good time. So I've always sort of had that, kind of entrepreneurial bent, and that followed me into college, where I got my master's. Well, actually, my undergrad was secondary to English and theater performance. So I basically did 2 majors over the course of 4 years. I did the victory lap, kind of scenario. And even during that, I was creating new programs for the theater department. I was writing and producing and directing my own plays. I was dramaturging. I was being an assistant director for the musicals. Like, I was always kind of doing stuff of that nature. And then I got offered a teaching job, basically from my old high school. So my old high school reached out, and I did an interview with them, and I was offered a teaching job for them. And then I had a friend who was teaching here in New York, and he was basically like, they need teachers. So I had an interview with them, and then both schools were offering me a job.
Wow. So when you said the Victory Lap, did that mean that you went right from a bachelor's into a master's degree, or?
It took me a little longer to graduate because
Okay.
because I had a double major. So I was, so I did the entire theater program as well as the entire education program.
I understand. Got it. Okay.
I got offered basically 2 jobs on the same day. It was basically in the same voicemail. And I remember going to some of my friends and saying, hey, I could go to New York. I could stay here in Rhode Island. And one of my friends said, here you're a big fish in a small pond. Everybody knows you. You can get anything that you want. You go to New York and nobody's going to know you. And I said, I'm going to go to New York and create my own small pond. And that's what I did.
Wow.
That's where the name of my company, Small Pond Enterprises, came from.
Okay.
So I moved to the city. I started teaching. I ended up running the drama program for the school. I was a dean of discipline for the summer school. I was also the head of the English department at one point. And during that time, I was also running a theater company. I was basically putting up shows, and I was learning more about kind of the producing world. And one of the things that I learned was about fundraising. At the time, fundraising was mainly done by hosting bar parties. If you were a theater person, you basically said like, hey, we're all going to be at this bar and give us $5 and we'll all like hang out. But the problem was everybody was doing those bar parties. So, and we were a very popular theater company. So we were doing basically a show every month. And so we had to fundraise in a pretty substantial way. So what I did was I started hosting gatherings where I would invite 15 or 16 other theater companies and basically say, take the back room of this restaurant and we'll invite actors, writers, other producers as the fundraiser. So people would donate $5, $10, $15, and then they get drink specials and get to meet 15 different theater companies all at once.
Wow.
And that really led to just a ton of people coming to me in the theater world and saying, let's talk about collaboration. Let's do things together. That's where I learned more about Broadway and met some more Broadway producers, kind of found out a little bit about that world. And that's how I ended up doing the whole going from high school English teacher to Broadway producer in under 2 years. So I'm taking you through I'm taking you through the very, very early stuff. I think I've maybe talked about this in a handful of interviews.
Yeah.
That brings me that brings me up to the Broadway producer side. I can keep going on the trajectory, or I can answer questions, whatever better.
Yeah, no, I mean, I want to unpack that just a little bit because,
sure.
When I heard you describing that, you answered the question already, which is, well, over what period of time were you doing all of that? And now you're telling me 2 years. So here you were in your 20s, and you were a new graduate. You come to New York. You're, it sounds like maybe you knew a few people, maybe more, I don't know. And you start at teaching at this school. Within 2 years' time, you were at some point head of the English department, running a theater program at the school, doing something in the summer as well. You said something about discipline, so I'm curious what that entailed. It sounds like you might have been wearing a different hat in the summertime there.
Yes. So the summer, basically for summer school, what would happen is they would open up the school for all of the kids who did not pass the Regents exams. And basically they had sort of like a training process, and then they had to retake all of these tests. And naturally, a lot of the kids who would fail those tests or stayed back were not exactly the easiest kids to deal with from a classroom management standpoint. So they had to create a role, and they called that role the Dean of Discipline, And the job of the dean of discipline was to basically go around to the different rooms, make sure that all of the teachers were having a good experience with the students. And if any kids were getting out of line, it was my job to have conversations with them about how they needed to not be out of line anymore, and help them understand what their limits were
Right.
in that particular environment.
Right. So there you were, in your 20s.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious what your mindset was at that time. I mean, already from high school through college, you were already a very entrepreneurial spirit. It sounds like you were the kind of person, and still are the kind of person who, rolls up your sleeves and pretty much dives into lots of things, with a sense of openness and curiosity. As you said, you've always wanted to solve problems in an interesting way. And so it sounds like you in 2 years, you were wearing all these different hats and trying to make a lot of different things happen. And at the same time, it sounds like almost like at lightning speed, developing all kinds of relationships, both in terms of the fundraising side in theater, but also relationships with, it sounds like, different venues, restaurants, bars. So I'm just curious what your mindset was at that time in terms of your goals, your ideas about where you were going, if you had those ideas,
Sure.
whether you were or whether you were just sort of getting up every day and saying, okay, I'll work at school and then at night I'll do this other stuff.
Yeah. So I was definitely just sort of always motivated by kind of new and interesting things. I would get I would get sort of bored easily, and if I sort of had hit a point where I felt like something was either not working or I felt like something was feeling too monotonous, I would always try to figure out how to change it. And in some cases that meant dropping it and just not doing that thing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And in other cases it meant innovating on it, right? And sort of trying adapting and sort of creating a different model. So I definitely, had lots of instances where I would reflect on the lessons that I would teach and then reimagine those lessons. And, 1 year I'd teach a lesson one way, and then the following year I'd teach it a completely different way. And have a bunch of different things that I would be kind of doing in that. So there was always sort of that experimental aspect in terms of mindset.
Yeah.
I also think that the other really big thing, and the reason why I was able to accomplish as much as I did, was I always had a collaborative mindset.
Uh-huh.
So I was always thinking about this aspect of who are the other people and what do they need and sort of what are they looking for. And that's carried sort of with me all of my life. I've really made it a point to understand other people as much as I possibly can, and then think about what would actually be the most effective or sort of most useful thing for them. So for example, with the theaters, with a lot of the theater fundraiser scenarios, I would talk to the guy behind the bar. I would talk to the restaurant owner, and I'd basically be like, so what does this place look like on a Monday night? Or if I was in a place, like let's say I was grading and on a Tuesday, I was at a bar because I was grading some papers, or I was, having a late dinner or whatever.
Yeah.
I'd ask that bartender, is it always dead in here at this time? And then figure out, okay, how could we bring business to them and also opportunity to us?
I see. So it sounds like the story of all that you did and all that occurred is only one part of the story. And I was so deeply curious as you were telling the story. So what was behind, how that all occurred? And that's what you're sharing here now is, how you were thinking about it. I love the image of you sitting at the bar grading papers and then wondering, why is it so quiet in here right now? Or what's going on here? And what's the business like? And so this, it sounds like this sort of problem solver mindset. This also sounds like just a very active curiosity, and
Yes.
And you're not shy about asking questions, or you're not shy about saying, well, let's figure out how we can do something about this.
Yeah. Yeah. I am very much, my two favorite things to do in the world are solving problems and connecting people. And I've kind of always known that that's been at the heart of who I am and what I'm about. So I'm always thinking, what is the challenge that somebody's experiencing? And then I'm thinking, am I the person who can help with that particular challenge? And if I'm not, who is?
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of who can I pass them on to, or sort of connect them to, who I think would enjoy it. And I have this framework where basically I call it the OCG framework. And basically, if somebody comes to me and offers me an opportunity, let's say they want to do an interview, or let's say they want to collaborate on something or work on something, I ask myself very, very honestly, is it an opportunity for me? Is it something that sort of lines up with the work that I'm trying to do and the things that I care about and the things that I'm interested in?
Yeah.
And if I don't feel it's an opportunity for me, then I realize that this person, in essence, just kind of found me by coincidence, and they haven't necessarily found the person that they need. So I always like to take that coincidence and turn it into a gift and say, who else within my circle could really benefit from this particular thing that's not really an opportunity for me, but could be a massive opportunity for them. And then I pass that along.
So OCG is opportunity, collaborate, or gift?
Opportunity, coincidence, gift.
Oh, opportunity, coincidence, gift.
Yep.
I like that. Wow. I love that. That explains how you got that all done in 2 years.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where I was teaching for about 8, right? So I was, in those first 2 years, I was building this profile and doing all of these different things. But over the next number of years, I was either letting go of certain things or expanding, right, on certain things. So in some cases, the smaller theater stuff kind of went away, and I was maybe just doing a little bit of small theater consulting when I was working on Broadway projects, right? And in some cases, the gatherings might have changed or shifted. Over the course of the 8 years that I was teaching, I probably produced on this off level. So that's the smaller theaters. I probably produced on the off level over 100 shows.
Wow.
And on the Broadway level, I was only really involved in a handful. I did a certain amount of fundraising for certain projects, but in many cases, I was just introducing other producers or introducing other investors to projects that I just thought these were good people and they should kind of know each other.
Yeah.
So all of these things were constantly kind of expanding, but it was the aspect of the speed in which I got into the Broadway world that everybody was curious about.
Yeah.
And I was getting my master's at the time at NYU in educational theater. And one of the concepts behind educational theater is simulations, where basically you have people act out scenarios, and you can learn a ton about them and about sort of the patterns that people have by creating these simulated scenarios. So I started hosting workshops where I simulated networking scenarios. So I
Yeah.
actually had people act out one-on-one meetings, job interviews, and cocktail parties, and play characters within those roles. And I noticed that there were a lot of patterns in just how people interacted, and patterns are always the precursor for frameworks. So I started developing these relationship building frameworks and teaching them. And I found that anybody that I would teach these things to, or sort of help these people with, would move much, much faster in their careers, and they'd be able to get in more doors and make more things happen. So I kind of started becoming known in that relationship building, like super connector kind of space. I ran a number of groups around this idea. And that's really where people in the business world started to kind of take notice. I started having more people in the world of like personal development and business reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'm trying to reach out to this person. I'm trying to do this. What's your advice?" Or sort of, "How can I do this?" Or, "How can I think about it?"
Yeah. So, what's interesting about it sounds like in everything that you have stepped into, it sounds like you've been able to almost kind of leverage it to also then benefit something else. That it sounds like nothing is a singular activity. It almost like everything layers onto something else. And it's not I get the feeling that just happens organically for you. It's not like you are intentionally saying, "Oh, how can I turn this one thing into 5 things?" It just unfolds that way.
Yeah, it's very much along the lines of, you can't see patterns a lot of the time until you see everything together,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the time, what would happen is I'd be working in one industry, I'd be doing something in one industry, and I'd realize that something from another industry applied,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And I'd be like, "Oh, why don't I try doing this in this particular way?" One of my favorites is, um, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was telling me about, I think, a trip that he had taken. I think it was to Japan, and he said that he went into a store and he was trying to buy a TV, and the TV, I think, was like $2,000 or something. And he was about to buy it, and his friend, who had lived there for a while, said, "No, no, don't buy it. Let's go. I've got a better way." And he proceeded to tell me that he and his friend got a whole group of people together who were all interested in buying TVs.
Uh-huh.
Went back to the store, and because so many people were interested in purchasing the TV, the store actually brought the price of the TV down. So we ended up getting the TV for like $200 or something.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So he told me this story, and there was a point where I was working with 2 other theater companies, and we were going to do our 3 shows in rep. And we were looking for space, and in New York City, space is one of the hardest. It is one of the hardest things for a theater company to find. Right, it costs you a lot of money for space. So a lot of companies were looking at $2,000 to $3,000 a week to rent a theater, if not more. And for a theater artist, that's a good chunk of money.
Yeah.
But I remembered that TV example, and I went to one theater and I said, "Listen, we've got 3 shows in rep, which means we can fill your theater. You don't have to worry about renting to anybody else for 3 months. Can you give us some kind of deal?" And they gave us a significant break on what the rent was.
Mm-hmm.
So it's those types of things, right? It's like, there's stuff that works for you in one particular industry, and you never know where that stuff is going to apply in another industry, or if another industry has even heard of or thought of that particular idea.
Yeah.
I interned with a producer named Ken Davenport, and Ken was one of the first commercial producers to ever write a blog. And this was around 2008, when, basically people were just starting to come online and starting to do the whole writing online thing.
Yeah.
And I watched as he sort of had this massive adoption in terms of followers and opportunities. And I said to him, I said, Ken, I'm curious. I only work right now on the smaller levels. I'm not working on any Broadway shows yet. What do you think of me writing a blog that is specifically for producers who are just getting started? And he was like, that's great. I think that's a great idea. And I started writing this blog called One Producer in the City, where I just kind of broke down sort of the things that I had learned about being a producer. And I would write it in the morning right before my classes would be starting, or I'd be writing it during one of my off periods, or, whatever the scenario was.
Yeah.
And it built my profile as a producer very, very quickly. And I had a much more substantial network as a result of that blog. So it's, bringing these different things from different industries in can really, really transform a business. And we're in a very interesting time, right now, and at the time we're recording this, right, we're all going through this coronavirus stuff,
right?
And I think that skill and that process is more important than ever. If something is not working right now, it's a really good idea to kind of go back and look at all the things that you have accomplished and what worked about them, and see, is there anything that you can take from there and bring it to your current situation?
Great advice. Great advice. I was just thinking about, some of the examples that you're providing here from your own life, and how that can help the listeners here think about how, because not everybody who's listening here is going to either be able to or want to, in the way that you have, in a short period of time, create the kinds of results that you've created necessarily. Not everybody maybe works as fast, let's say, but
Sure.
At the same time, I love what you're talking about here in terms of connecting with people, having that problem-solving mindset, and also I love what you're talking about in terms of just writing down, blogging about what you know, and it sounds like you did some of that in a way where you didn't really spend a lot of time overthinking or worrying about, well, gee, I wonder if other people are writing these things down, or you just wrote down what you know. And I think oftentimes people stop themselves from stepping into something because they think, oh, well, there's other people who've already done this, or they get, caught up in the imposter syndrome thing. So I think what you're saying here is, look, leverage your strengths, draw on the things that you already know, and don't get in your own way. Don't shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, I get asked all the time. So I write a daily email, which means I write Monday through Friday, and it comes out every Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. No matter what is happening in the world, it always comes out. And the question that I get asked numerous times is, how do you write daily? How do you put out that much content? And my answer is always the same. I give myself permission to suck. There is absolutely no way that I could every single day write something completely mind-blowing and brilliant that everybody in the world is going to be like, oh my God, this, this is it, right?
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, consistency is more important than anything else.
Right.
And that's what most of us forget. We sometimes have this belief that we're going to do this one post, or we're going to write this one thing, or we're going to do this one thing. It's going to change our life. So it's going to shift it. It's going to shift everything.
Right.
But that's just not true.
Right.
And if you really want to build trust, you basically build as much consistency as possible, because the more that people can expect to hear from you, the less worried they are that you won't show up.
That's right.
And if they're not worried that you're not going to show up, and you're constantly being there and you're giving them good information, they don't care if there's an off day. They don't care if the content, that particular day doesn't apply to them, or whatever the scenario is, because you're constantly showing up, thinking about them, and helping them. And then the other thing I'll say specifically about this idea of, well, other people are doing this, why even throw my hat into the ring, or why even bother? Because there are people out there who are basically, they want your point of view.
Right.
I can guarantee you there are people out there who are interested in your point of view, and there's a very, very good chance that they're not getting that from somewhere else.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, you get a lot of people who get concerned about this idea of competition, and everybody else is doing it. I'm just going to look like a copycat, blah blah blah, all this other stuff. And there is no competition. There's only specialization. And the more that you specialize, the more that you dig into who you truly are and what you're all about, and then communicate that in whatever platform you choose, you will not have to worry. Even if somebody is doing the exact same thing as you, even if somebody has the exact same information, the exact same stuff out there, they're not going to deliver it like you. They're not going to talk about it in your way. And if you double down on you, you're going to win.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. So we will include some information for our listeners in terms of how they can find your daily email in our show notes, for sure.
Awesome.
I am curious about your daily email. And in terms of the translation from the smaller theater to then moving into Broadway, tell us a little more about that transition.
Sure. So basically, the way that Broadway works is you have to raise money, and you have to raise a very, very large amount of money. So in the smaller theater world, your top show, unless you're doing something like really, really fancy, your top show is probably like a $25,000-$30,000 raise, which for a lot of people is, in the arts, is considered a decent chunk of money. But in the world of Broadway, that's very little money, right?
Yeah.
That's not much at all. Yeah. So in essence, you have to kind of go upstream in terms of who you're dealing with. You're dealing with people who are going to invest and potentially write larger checks for those projects, as opposed to on the smaller level, people are going to donate. So it takes a very, very different angle and a different way of looking at things. So what I did was just, as I've done with everything else, I looked at the workings of Broadway, and the thing that I learned was that what matters to many, many producers is credit, right? It's being able to raise the money to have your name on the project, to be able to participate in the project, all these different types of things. So new producers naturally go to established producers and say, can I raise money for this project? And if I raise this much, can I get this credit, right? Can I get this title? Mm-hmm. So when I saw that, I, had a different motivation. I really wasn't interested in credit. I was interested in getting better at raising money. So what I did was I went to a bunch of producers and I said, listen, I don't really care about credit. I just want to get better at this skill of raising money. So if you're willing to give me deal flow, if you're willing to give me shows to promote, I'm more than happy to float it out to some investors. I can't promise anything, but you never know. And a lot of producers took me up on that. So unlike a lot of the other people, I wasn't just going out with one show. I was going out with 5 or 6. So I had kind of a portfolio. So I would go to a bunch of investors and say, here's a list of things that I'm connected to. Which are you interested in? And if I was personally, involved with that show or raising money, for that particular producer, then I would sort of, pitch the show. And if I wasn't, I would just introduce them to that producer. And then that producer would have an investor and it would sort of work. And what happened was it built my reputation very quickly. People started paying a lot of attention. And within a very short period of time, I had producers asking me to go to lunch and breakfast and then offering me credit and saying, you've already proved yourself. You've already proved that you can raise this money. I'm happy to put your name on this if you decide that you want to raise money for it.
Mm-hmm. So again, this was you connecting with people. This was essentially, I mean, not to oversimplify it, but it sounds like you really used your talent really for connecting with people, finding out what their needs were and making sure their needs were met, and almost taking yourself out of the equation in some ways.
Yeah. In many, many cases, if you're raising money, if you're putting, if you're working on something that's sort of a larger project, the absolute worst thing that you can do is put yourself in front of it.
Yeah.
Like, the best thing that you can do is help people understand why that thing will be valuable and useful to them, and then get out of the way, because nobody will be happy if they feel like they were pushed into making a decision.
Yeah.
And I have lots of conversations with entrepreneurs about this too, where it's just like, ask enough questions so that people tell you the things that you need to hear, and help them understand what it is that you offer, and help them understand how you can help them and what you can do. But the decision needs to be theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just present the value, help people understand how it's going to make things better for them, and help them know sort of where they need to go to work with you, or sort of make it happen. You don't have to be incredibly pushy in all of this. People will just sort of like, yeah, let's do something. Let's do something together. And investment is the same way. I almost never went to somebody and said, I think you should invest in this show.
Yeah.
I would always go and say, here's why I think this show has value. Here's why I think there's lots of opportunity. I'm not going to be the producer who's going to tell you that there isn't risk here. Every show has risk. So this is a risky investment, like everybody, any Broadway show is. But here's the reasons why I think this could do well. And then I'd say, I'm curious what you think. I'd let them tell me if they thought it was an interesting show, if they thought it was a good project, et cetera. And I'd listen to them. And then based on that conversation, I'd either say, okay, it sounds like you might be interested in, having more conversations about this, and possibly getting involved. Is there more that you need from me? Is there more that you need to hear? And sometimes they'd have some additional questions. And in other cases, they'd just be like, okay, I'm going to take a look at this, and we'll circle back, and we'll talk. Or they'd say, okay, I'm going to invest, and they'd write the check.
So when you moved from fundraising for the smaller theater and expanding to Broadway, which was really it sounds like really a whole new world in some ways. Were you still teaching at this time? Were you still a teacher?
Yes, it was towards the very end of my teaching career that I was having those conversations. And
what made you decide to stop teaching?
I was reading Seth Godin's book Lynchpin on the subway. It had come out. I had seen him speak. I was a big fan of his from just all of the different books that I was given before that. And when Lynchpin launched, he did a big launch event and he did a big talk. And I was reading the book on the subway, and he talks about this idea of how school basically was built to teach us how to be better factory workers. And that's why there were like lines and rows and, keep your head down, do your work, and all of those different types of things. And I had this realization that because most of the focus was around kids passing a standardized test and not really anything else, that it was really just kind of a factory worker kind of thing. I had made it interesting for myself, and I had made it exciting, and I loved my students, and I loved teaching. But I realized that if I kept teaching, I would just be doing the same thing, and I would constantly be being evaluated on something that was beyond my control. I couldn't always control how well these kids were going to do on these tests, no matter how well I taught them. And I didn't like the idea of that being the only value that was seen. So I said, you know what? I'm a really good teacher. I'm very, very good at breaking things down and helping people understand concepts. So I think I think I could go out and I could do this on my own, and I could teach my own concepts, my own ideas, and be sort of more in this entrepreneurial space. And I put in my notice and moved on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so at that point, you were really mostly in the theater producing fundraising world, or were you also then building the business that you have today?
So I was mostly in the producer fundraising world, but I was starting to get some conversations with people from the business side of things, and then randomly I got approached by an educational technology startup that was being built, and I was brought in to basically do operations at the very beginning, because they didn't really have anybody to sort of make sure the ships ran on time, kind of thing. And then they moved me when they saw how I was getting into a lot of doors and making things happen pretty quickly. They moved me into a business development role. So I was doing biz dev. And while I was doing that, they sent me to a conference, and I was reminded of sort of how broken the conference model was. And when I got back from that conference, I just kind of said, you know what, I really want there to be a conference where people don't feel like numbers, where people are able to just like really get to know each other. And that was 2012. And that's when I did the first ConnectorCon. Where I brought all these connectors together, and basically we had, I programmed the whole thing. You want to talk about speed? The entire thing from idea to execution was about 35 days.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So you want to talk about adrenaline?
I was just going to say, so folks, don't try this at home. Because I've planned large events, and even when we know what we're doing, 35 days is not much time. But then again, you live in New York, and so if we're doing it in New York time, I guess 35 days is doable.
I mean, it was crazy. I called in a lot of favors, and I threw a lot of stuff together. But it at the end of that conference, I just had so many people come up to me. It was the first time I had really shared a lot of my methodologies in sort of a more public way, and then also kind of put together all of this education, right? So there were panels and workshops for people to do and all this other stuff. So a lot of people just kind of saw me in a new light, and a number of folks came to me and said, this is really solid work. Like, you need to keep doing this. So that January, I left the educational technology startup, and then really focused on this relationship building, consulting, coaching work for a pretty good chunk of time.
Yeah. And well, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I did have one question for you.
Yeah.
I want to move forward to more about what you're doing today.
Sure.
But I was curious about your diving into, wanting to learn more about how to raise money. And
Mhm.
I was curious, as you were teaching and I knew, you were, from high school through college, you were interested in theater. But I was curious about the interest in fundraising per se, because I was thinking, well, you were interested in fundraising, but only fundraising for theater, or were you interested in fundraising in general? Like, would you have raised money? Would you have tried to raise money for a cure for cancer, or some other, some other problem, since you like to solve problems?
Yeah. I mean, I was sort of really just kind of in this place of like, how do I help? Right. So how do I help, and how do I make something happen? So raising money became something of a fascination for me, because I realized that if you raise money, people can do more. Right. There's more that need to happen. So very similar to sort of like this idea of like, that small hinge that swings the big door. It's just one of those skills that if you hone it, you're going to be able to use it in so many other places. Like
Yeah.
I've been able to do so much as an entrepreneur. I've been able to sell, so many different types of things, and put so many different things out there, because I spent so much time taking the time to kind of learn how to raise money, right, and
Yeah.
get people to write larger checks, and
Yes.
to really sort of understand that world, and understand that dynamic. So for me, it was me noticing something that I felt was a very, very big lever, and saying, if I get better at this, it's going to serve me no matter which direction I go in.
Yes. Got it. Got it. Yeah. And so, so let's go to today. What does life look like today for you?
Yeah. So today I have a uh, 3-year-old and a 4-month-old. So life is very different.
Mhm.
And having a family, and all of those different types of things really kind of changes things for you. Um, and things have shifted in regards to the work that I do. So for a long time, I was doing a lot of work solely in the relationship building space, teaching people about building relationships, teaching sort of all the networking stuff, and things like that. But as I started to just kind of notice that market continue to grow, and more people teach these things, I realized that it wasn't really the place for me, because I didn't want to go the direction that most people were going in, which was I'll teach you how to meet famous people, right?
Right.
Download my free XYZ, and you'll be covered in the New York Times and make millions. It just, like, that was not the vibe that I
Mhm.
wanted. So I started to look at, well, what is something else that's really interesting to me? And this was around the time my first daughter was born. And as I was kind of looking at the market and sort of what was happening, I noticed that this thought leadership idea was coming up quite a bit. And one of the things that was being touted quite a bit was this idea of sort of how to be different, show different ideas. But what I noticed was that everybody started teaching people classes and programs on how to be different. So everybody started to sound the same.
Right.
Uh, so I was like, well, what's the thing that kind of cuts through all of this? Even if you've used somebody's like templated formula to create your brand or whatever. And I realized that it was referability. It was the aspect of, will people talk about you when you're not in the room? And when I look back on all of the things that I've done, they're all the result of people talking about me when I wasn't there. And basically, like, you need to meet Michael, kind of thing. So I started to say, okay, well, how could you do that for others? And I came up with this idea of helping people create referable brands. So I started working with entrepreneurs and solopreneurs on their knowledge and sort of intellectual property, and putting it through the lens of accessibility, influence, and memory. So first, from an accessibility standpoint, can people outside of your industry actually understand what you're saying? Which is usually kind of the first hurdle, because we all kind of have this echo chamber of the enlightened where we're all talking about the same things and using the same words. And then second, from an influence standpoint, will people share your ideas and put your ideas out there? And what I discovered was that while there were all of these things out there about persuasion and sort of how to get people to do things, what really causes us to share something is more about how we look when we share it. So I started helping my clients think about what could they create that other people would want to pass along and show to their friends, because it made them look cool. It made them look like they had the big ideas, etc. And then the last piece was memory, because it wouldn't matter if your stuff was really, really great if people couldn't easily remember it, right? And actually share it with somebody else. So I started doing that work, and that has been the thing that has really become the most interesting for people. It's the thing I get interviewed about all the time. It's the it's something that I've worked with a lot of my clients on, especially during these times, sort of helping them reposition things and make it so that people will talk about their ideas when they're not there.
Mm-hmm. So, what's interesting, we were talking earlier about consistency, and even though you've done all these different things, there's some consistency throughout all of it. The consistency of the way that you like to solve problems, and the way that you connect with people, and the way you tune into people. And so what you're talking about, the kinds of things that you're doing today, is tuning into the entrepreneurs and the solopreneurs that you work with, and then helping them to solve their problems and the way that they can get their brand out there and to make themselves known and memorable. It's a beautiful thing. I'm curious, are you also still involved with fundraising and the theater community?
I'm definitely still involved with that community. I don't actively work on any shows currently. There hasn't been anything that has really sort of piqued my interest enough to sort of jump back into the ring, if you will. But I still have plenty of friends within the theater world. I'm always introducing people to either investors or other producers that I think could help them out. I'm always finding ways to thread people together from different industries, getting them a chance to chat with each other. So I'm always thinking about this. But there aren't any shows right now that people have been raising for that have necessarily made me say, "Oh my God, I have to do this."
Yeah. So it's on the stove, but it's not on the front burner right now.
Exactly.
Well, I hope you do keep it on the stove, because there's nothing I like more than a good Broadway show.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, Mike, so if people want to learn more about your work, I think we got a really good feel for how you think and how that kind of thinking has followed you through your career trajectory. Thank you so much for all that you've shared with us today. How can people find you?
Sure. So my website is just smallpondenterprises.com. I am sharing a lot of info right now on my podcast as well, which is accesstoanyonepodcast.com. And I'm doing a solo series right now, specifically about how I'm dealing with the different things that are coming up with coronavirus, and just a lot of tips about sort of ways that I'm thinking about it, trends that I'm seeing, stuff that I'm noticing. And I'm very, very active on social. So you can find me on the Book of Faces. I'm just Mike Roderick on there because my Michael Roderick account got hacked a number of years back. But if you're looking for me on LinkedIn or any of the other social places, I'm Michael Roderick. So just always feel free to reach out and say hi. I'm always happy to chat with new people.
And I know that is so true. So again, thanks, Mike. And we will have all this information in the show notes, so people will be able to find you very easily. Thank you so much again for being here today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tammy. This was an absolute blast, and really, really wonderful questions, and great opportunity to kind of look back at all of the different the different things and discover some new things. So thank you again for such a great conversation.
Oh, my pleasure. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Mike Roderick. It was so interesting to speak with him and learn about his professional path to where he is today. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? Is there something you'll put into action that you'll benefit from for years to come? Share what resonated with you in the show notes at workfromtheinsideout.com. Look for episode 075. That's also where you'll find all the links and resources from today's podcast. If you enjoyed this episode with Mike, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd love to read your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at www.tammygoularloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcasts button or follow the instructions provided there. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. And who knows, maybe you'll be my next interview on this podcast. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.